If you drive down the coast from Galveston to, say, Lake Jackson, you're going to roll through Hitchcock, and you'll see these things. They look like 4 massive concrete tuning forks. Well, as it turns out, those tall Texas tuning forks are all about submarines. During the Second World War, the Gulf Coast was on high alert. Well, the whole country was on high alert, obviously, but the Gulf Coast in particular was in a frenzy because of Operation Paukenschlag. This roughly translates to Operation Drumbeat or Timpani, but the German submarine commanders colloquially referred to it as the second happy time. To understand the second happy time in 1942, I think we need to understand the first happy time in 1940 to 41, when German U-boats were stalking Allied shipping vessels in the North Atlantic and the North Sea. When Hitler declared war on the USA on December 11, 1941, the second happy time, or American shooting season, was on. After a 2-week journey from Europe, the first wave of subs began torpedoing targets off the east coast of the U.S. Subsequent waves targeted vessels in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. The yellow markers on this map represent vessels damaged or sunk by German U-boats in the Gulf and Caribbean and up the coast in 1942. All told, more than 600 vessels were sunk and thousands of lives were lost. The ships and planes of the United States were busy with war abroad, so the subs truly caught us with our pants down. In the month of May 1942 alone, 1 ship per day was lost to German torpedoes in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the military solution to this problem was LTAs and LTA stations. If you don't know, LTA stands for lighter than air. The military solution was blimps, specifically K-type blimps that could cruise at about 75 miles per hour and had a range of 2,000 miles. And they could hover and drop depth charges on any deserving watercraft immediately below them. K-types were friggin' huge. This is a grown man repairing the tail of one at Hitchcock. The proportions are kind of like a tick on my dog's back. So chunky, thick blimps got to live somewhere, right? And so did the men who manned them. So the U.S. government began erecting a chain of LTA bases all along the coast. Bases in Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Georgia covered the East Coast, while Florida, Louisiana, and our Hitchcock base would patrol the waters of the Gulf. The Navy acquired the land in Galveston County for our blimp base, about 3,500 acres, for $143,000 in July 1942. In less than a year, nearly 50 buildings were ready for service. These included a 40,000 square foot brick warehouse, barracks, vehicle garages, a recreation building with a gym and a swimming pool. But at the center of the action were our 4 concrete tuning forks. You see, they served as the anchors of a massive wooden blimp hangar that was kind of shaped like a loaf of bread. Think a Quonset hut mated with a dachshund. 1,000 feet long, 300 feet wide, 200 feet tall, it offered luxurious 300,000 square feet of breathing room for up to 6 K-type blimps. A 2,000-foot circular landing mat paved with asphalt lay just outside of the enormous hangar doors. There's still a K-type blimp hangar of this vintage standing in Oregon with the bread loaf structure still intact. As you can see, my wiener dog Quonset hut comparison is pretty accurate, if not a little bit weird. The Hitchcock base was commissioned in May 1943, and the first blimp arrived within weeks. Soon, ZP-23, Hitchcock's blimp squadron, was designated, and 133 personnel were brought in to fly LTA missions. And that they did. They blimped around the coast diligently, but they never saw a single U-boat. Operation Paukenschlag had ended before construction on the base was even begun. Subsequent submarine attacks were about a tenth of what they'd been at the height of the second happy time. Blimp Base Hitchcock became operational about a year after the happy time ended. So after just 17 months as an LTA base, the installation was designated Naval Air Station Hitchcock and turned operations to heavier-than-air missions. It was closed altogether after the war and sold for roughly the price of what the Navy paid for that land back in 1942, about $140,000. During the Korean War, half-tracks and tanks of World War II vintage were remanufactured on the grounds of the former blimp base, and thus ended its entire professional career. We have Hurricane Carla to thank for the stark appearance of the blimp hangar that we see today. The wooden bread loaf was badly damaged in the 1961 storm, and ultimately, the owners decided that the wooden ruins were way too dangerous for the public, and what remained was demolished except for the concrete pillars. So the next time you're up Hitchcock Way, tip your hat to the lighter-than-air base that missed its calling. Had it sprung up on the landscape just a year sooner, this story might have been one of airmen dropping bombs valiantly on U-boats from blimps in defense of oil refineries and tankers carrying diesel oil to theaters of war. Instead, it's the story of some alien-looking architectural ruins on Blimp Base Road in Galveston County. If you grew up around Hitchcock, I bet you have some blimp base stories to tell. I know that y'all got up to no good as teenagers there, and I want you to tell us about them. Leave those down in the comments below. And finally, a note of thanks to our donors who give of themselves so that we can talk about Texas and work to keep honest Texas history in the bloodstream. The trust is always on history's side. Until next time, God and Texas, y'all.